Dear all, welcome to another episode of The Nature of the Future, a series of conversations. My name is Grzegorz Jankowicz and I'm a program director of the Conrad Festival. For these interviews, I invite writers I admire, writers from whom I think we can learn something important about the present and the future. My interviewee today is Vanessa Woods, an Australian science writer and journalist, author of children's books. We have two books co-written by Vanessa in Polish. These are The Genius of Dogs, How Dogs Are Smarter Than You Think, and Survival of the Friendliest, Understanding of Our Origins and Rediscovering Our Common Humanity. The other author of these books is Brianem Hare'em. Hello, Vanessa.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you for accepting my invitation. Vanessa, I would like to talk to you and with you about friendliness as a survival tool. And let me get immediately into it. The concept of survival of the strongest became very popular at one point, and it is still popular today. How did it originate, and why is it so harmful to humans as individuals and communities?
So survival of the strongest or survival of the fittest was really something that was used by Darwin. And really fitness was really just your ability to reproduce. So what Darwin was talking about, that, you know, if you had certain evolutionary strategies that would help you survive and reproduce, this would be advantageous to you. But the way it kind of disseminated in popular culture was that fitness, which was confused with physical fitness. So instead of being reproductively fit, people took it to mean as, oh, you're physically fit and you're physically strong. And this really kind of like slotted into this sort of like popular perception that you have to be strong and dominant and fierce in order to survive and thrive. But in actual fact, this is not the case.
But why is it harmful to us? Why does it lead us to a collective destruction?
So this kind of thinking, survival of the fittest, it really plays into dominance hierarchy. So there are people who think that certain groups of people are inferior, who think that certain groups of people are less deserving of medical care and of help and of education. And we see this in, you know, all sorts of research. And so, you know, this idea that, you know, that there are certain groups who are dominant for a reason because they're stronger or they're fitter, or, you know, having this kind of like evolutionary reason really seems to back up this sort of social dominance orientation, is what we call it. This kind of idea that one group is more deserving and, you know, better than another group.
We think of our species as the best adapted to life on Earth, species that has achieved great evolutionary success. And of course, this is true, at least to a certain extent, for there have been other species that have lived on Earth longer, and from an evolutionary perspective, their success has been even greater, hasn't it?
Yes, no, absolutely. I mean, you look at any kind of insect and they just, you know, just completely wipe us out in terms of, you know, how successful they are, how many they are, the kind of complex societies they formed. But I guess kind of being an egotistical species to start with, we really only sort of value what we can see, and that would be other large mammals. And it certainly is without question that we are the most successful mammal on the planet. But if you include sort of other categories, we don't even come close.
But the species Homo sapiens lived for a long time among other species of humans, and only at a certain point did its dominance begin to become noticeable. What influenced this radical change, And what took us so long to become dominant among other species?
So that was sort of like a really interesting kind of like awakening in evolutionary anthropology, this realization that we weren't always the only species on the planet. And actually just in our short time of, 200,000 years on Earth, there were probably like at least 4 other human species, maybe more, that we shared the planet with. And, even though we started looking like modern humans around 200,000 years ago, we really were not the clear contenders for world domination. I mean, just Neanderthals, for example, I mean, they had bigger brains than we did, or at least as big brains than we did. They had culture, they had language, they had all this sophisticated technology. And as we kind of, fled the cold weather in the north, the Neanderthals were the ones who moved in to take our place. So it wasn't really apparent that we were going to win until about 50,000 years ago.
And what triggered this change? What made us so powerful at certain point of time?
So people have a lot of different ideas. Like, one is technology, the other is culture and language. But as I said, like, the Neanderthals had all of those things. And so what we propose in the book is that we became friendlier. And by becoming friendlier, it led to a unique kind of cooperation that allowed us to share and process information in a way that allowed for rapid cultural evolution and the ratcheting of technology, so that then we see this huge population explosion in the fossil evidence.
We usually imagine our cooperation with other species as initiated by humans, initiated by us. We think that certain species, such as dogs, were domesticated by us. But all indications are that it was the other way around. It was not we who domesticated the dogs, for example, but they adopted us. How did it happen, and why those species like dogs try to be closer to us in the past?
Dogs are a great example of survival of the friendliest, because they were able to sort of like find this new ecological niche living with humans. So, as you said, we often think that, we went out there and chose the animals that we decided that would be good companions or hunters or, good food. And then we, intentionally went to domesticate those. But what we find in the fossil record is that one thing that we are really good at is making trash. And a lot of these human settlements would have had lots of garbage around the outer areas. And so if you were a wolf-like ancestor who was, sort of like really living on the edge of survival, then this kind of like the trash and the waste that we put out would have been amazingly nutritious. Now, the problem, if you were one of these wolf-like ancestors, is that, as humans, we had annihilated almost every large carnivore in the Ice Age. And these wolves were, larger than the ones we see today. And so any wolf who was threatening or aggressive would have been killed very quickly. Our weapons were very sophisticated by then. So what we propose and what others have proposed is that, these early wolves who were friendly, they may have approached under a cover of darkness, but who were non-threatening, who were not afraid of humans as a predator, who were not afraid to approach, and be in our proximity, they would have been able to use all this kind of like waste and leftover food to, quickly tap into this, to their fitness, and they would have reproduced. And there you get Darwin's survival of the fittest in its true form. But it was because they were friendlier that this initial kind of stage of domestication was able to take place.
In the book, you describe the changes that occur in domesticated species. These changes even involve physiology. Do I understand correctly that these changes occur to increase the impression of friendliness and enable individual species to benefit more from cooperation with others?
So there was this really exciting fox experiment done in Russia where this Russian geneticist, Dmitry Belayev, bred foxes very intensely to be friendly, as we would have seen with these, early wolves or proto dogs. And the selection for friendliness was so strong that very quickly, in just a few generations, you could see physical changes. So when it's kind of like different to taming. If I found like a wolf right now and kind of, a baby wolf and brought it up, it might be tame, but it's not domesticated, because domestication is these genetic changes that are inherited. And so, this extreme selection pressure for friendliness actually changed these foxes in a way that was very similar to what we see between wolves and dogs. So their snouts got shorter, their ears got floppy, they had these like splotchy coats, and then they were just really friendly. They were unafraid. These little foxes like wag their tails. Sometimes they bark. So it was just this experiment that showed really beautifully what must have happened over a long period of time with these proto dogs, is that, this extreme selection pressure for friendliness was what actually led to the physical changes that we see.
Humans also have such strategies or similar strategies, but in our case, they can be faked. I conduct reading workshops in prisons, and when I first came to the prison, I met a group of prisoners, and I worked with them for a couple of hours. In this group, there were two individuals, very active individuals, but they were active in different ways. One of them was very dominant. He looked like a gangster. He was huge man, tattooed, scary. The other one was active in a very quiet, in a very soft way. His expressions were very soft, and he tried to communicate with others in a very calm way. It turned out that the former was sent to prison for not paying taxes, and the quiet one was sent to prisons like for everything.
Oh, wow.
It proves that friendliness pays off. But in this particular case, it was totally faked. It was a tool for this gentleman for establishing a peaceful relationship with others, but the only person who benefited from this relationship was himself.
Yes, I mean, he sounds like a classic psychopath, very charming, very affable, and able to use people in that way. And I think the reason why people reacted to him that way is because we are a friendly species, and we are prepared to cooperate and trust and work with people who we see as being like ourselves. And so if we make a connection with someone, then we will go out of our way to be cooperative.
And do other species also fake friendliness to achieve something, or is it more authentic in them? And is this category, authenticity, even relevant here?
Other species can definitely use deception. I think one of the best studied species would be chimpanzees, because they're so closely related to us that research with them has come a long way. So it does seem that chimpanzees sort of to a certain extent know what you know and can use that information to deceive you. A lot of other people have observed this behavior in other animals, but both to each other and sometimes in interactions with humans. But I think humans have a really kind of advanced level of this cognitive manipulation, of deception, of theory of mind, where it is. I mean, we don't have any comparison really in the animal world.
The $100 test involves handing someone $100 and informing them that they will be able to keep it if they share it with someone else. But they must choose an amount that will also satisfy the other person. Most of people are willing to give about half of this amount to another. And if this is the case, and this test proves that this is the case, why do we have so much greed in the world?
That experiment was really surprising to economists because, just the logical conclusion would be that you would just keep the $100 and not share it with anyone. So that was a surprise, I think, just, that there was this sort of willingness to share. But of course, as you point out, we're not always like that all the time. And I think what we propose is that humans as a species really are the only ones that have this concept of an intra-group stranger or an in-group stranger. So with all other animals, even our closest living relatives, chimpanzees and bonobos, a stranger is just simply someone that you've never met before. And a group member or a friend is someone that you know. And with humans, what we have is this entirely separate category of someone who, that I've just met, that I instantly recognize as one of my own. So, we're having this wonderful conversation. We got on the Zoom call. I'm like, oh, hello. Yes, I recognize you as someone who loves books, as someone who loves to read, as someone who loves literature. Like, because I recognize you as being someone like me, I'm instantly prepared to cooperate with you, to give you whatever it is you need, to spend time with you. If you came over here, I would take you out for lunch. So it's this sort of category that sets us apart in humans, and it makes us very willing to cooperate. But it also means that if you said to me, oh, someone's coming after me or someone is threatening me, then I would be prepared to join with you to protect you against whoever was threatening you, because I feel like you're part of my group. And so with humans, this kind of friendliness is like a two-edged sword, and we call it the mama bear hypothesis, is that, when is a mother polar bear most loving and most kind? It's when she's with her cubs. But also, this is the point where she's at the most dangerous. And so with humans, we take that to a larger scale. We are loving and kind and cooperative and communicative with our group, even if this group is on a global scale. But if we feel like our group is being threatened, then we're instantly prepared to do the worst of whatever it is, to do whatever it takes to protect our group members from this outside threat, even if, and in fact, especially if this outside threat is another group of humans.
And what can we learn from bonobos, you mentioned a second ago, who are willing to cooperate with other members of their species? As you said, in the case of humans, the willingness to cooperate usually extends to a narrow circle of family, friends, or allies. But bonobos, they help even strangers, and they help strangers more willingly than they help themselves. Why is that?
Bonobos are just so special. If anyone has the chance to spend some time with them, just they are so funny and so strange. And one of the most endearing qualities they have is this ability to see all strangers as friends and to really put the needs of strangers above their friends. So if they were playing this kind of economic game, they would always share with a stranger, preferably over a friend of theirs. They would give their money, they would give their $100 to someone they hadn't even seen before over one of their members of their friends or their family. They just have this incredible Good Samaritan sort of aspect to them. And we all know people like this. We all know people who will go out of their way to, who are these extreme altruists, but bonobos just kind of have that characteristic of as a species, and that makes them very special.
And what happened to them in the past that they started to express this friendliness to even strangers, to those who are not within their main group?
So they will travel together, they would share food together. Sometimes they have sociosexual activity, which is sort of they'll rub their genitals, they'll hug, they'll kiss, and then they'll just, if two strange groups of bonobos meet each other, they'll just go off and travel around for a couple of weeks, hang out, eat food, and then before they go their separate ways. And in chimpanzees, this is definitely not the case.
Bonobos, as you write in the book, use violence to maintain balance and peace in the group. They react aggressively to an attack on one of their own. What can we learn from them about how to react decisively in an attack situation? You mentioned that we humans, when we create a friendly relationship with someone and this person is in danger, we are about to protect this person or fight against someone else if we understand that this person is in danger. But from your book, I understood that bonobos use similar but not entirely the same strategy in the situation of attack.
So chimpanzees are a close relative of bonobos. They're, very similar genetically to bonobos and very similar to us, but they do have a different strategy. So in chimpanzees, if you're a stranger, if you live outside the group territory, there's been lots of research showing that this kind of like warfare happens over border territory, over females. And, I've known chimpanzees who are, like humans, can be incredibly loving and kind, but just when they're in this situation where they're threatened or there's some kind of like border dispute, they can be horrible. And in people, it's the same. And in terms of like, what can we learn from that? I think that it's necessary to understand our own nature before we can, make steps to improve it. And then also to recognize where that nature comes from and why, and what would have been the use on it. Like what was the survival of that fitness several million years ago. So, that's crucial. But I think to looking at, species like bonobos, then we're able to overcome, because we are really an intelligent species, to be able to overcome that sort of initial fear and distrust of other groups and be able to form cross-group friendships, unlike chimpanzees who cannot do the same thing.
In the book, you emphasize that challenges, problems we face today and will face in the future will not be solved by our intelligence or technology, but by an appropriate level of tolerance. But how do we spread tolerance? You quote certain research, statistics that show that tolerance cannot be taught to those who have hostile attitudes towards others. So how can we make today's humans more tolerant if we cannot use education to do so?
So I think that, there's several levels of what we can do. There's what we can do as individuals. There's what we can do as a society. There's what needs to happen at a governmental and institutional level. And it's all about friendliness and making personal connections. So we all have in-groups and we have out-groups. And so there are certain groups of people who we just distrust. And I think that intelligence does have something to do with it, even though it is, really an emotional response. But the intelligence is just observing your antipathy to it. So if it was me, I would, a certain group of people that I distrust, for example, Carolina fans, because I'm at Duke, and, we have a very fierce rivalry. So my distrust towards them, I would sort of like take 2 steps back and almost observe it. And then I would do my best not to avoid that group. And if I could, I would make friends with them. And another example is that we have so we visit this very rural town. We're in North Carolina, and of course we're in this university town that is so liberal and so wonderful. But we go and stay in the mountains in a really rural area. We've been going to the same place for a long time now. And the people there are politically, ideologically worlds away from where we are. They have beliefs and they have ideas that, would just be shocking and abhorrent. And a lot of the, the horrible dialogue that's said against, rural Americans and where they're coming from and who they're voting for, that's these people. But because we've been going to the same place for years, like some people are these friends now. They're our friends. They've helped us. And so instead, and something that I do, which is really contrary to all advice, is that I talk to them. I'm like, why don't you think COVID vaccines work? Do you really think, and not in a just, I like to engage them, and I like to, have conversations with them about where they get these ideas. And it's not even, what we say to each other. It's just that, like, with a calm and friendly conversation, it's almost happened subconsciously that now, this entire group of rural Americans that I've been visiting, like, once a month forever, are, they're not a separate group of people that I need to protect my group of people from. They're a group of people just like me. And that is what all the research has shown. Every single, study on effective ways to overcome any kind of dehumanization against another group, it all comes back to personal relationships and cross-group friendships. And just another example is that, there was this study on the Germans who sheltered Jews from the Nazis. And, they looked at all of them, because it wasn't very many, but there was this small proportion of Germans who risked their lives. And not that, like, the Nazis would come for your whole family if they found out that, you were helping. I mean, they'd throw all of you into a concentration camp. So it was this extreme personal danger that these few Germans undertook. And so there was this study that said, well, what is it that united them? Were they, particularly rebellious against authority? Were they, an educated class? Were they in some kind of profession? Like, were they brave? Were they just, slightly psychopathic, that they didn't feel any fear? Like, what was it? And the only thing that united all these different people that helped rescue Jews was that they had known or had loved someone who was Jewish. So one of them was like a school teacher for Jewish children, another who had a stepmother who was Jewish. And so this was really like the one uniting thing. And so when you talk about at a policy level, at the level of democracy, well, democracy is all about giving power to minority groups. It is about, having a balance, having checks and balances, about, opportunities for different sides to engage in discourse and debate. And, and that is why you see, like, the level of peace in peaceful democracies don't go to war with each other. There's much less conflict in them, and they're not perfect by any means. But if you're looking at a way to sort of like diffuse this tendency we have to dehumanize and persecute other groups of people, it really is just this very simple act of approaching without fear and just beginning friendships.
From what you said, one could draw a conclusion that separation is one of the sources of our huge social problems. That when we are not together, we do not know each other, we are not able to get familiar with the other, we are more willing to dehumanize this person or the group. But from this perspective, it looks like pandemic actually created very dangerous circumstances for our social relationships, because separation was permanent for some time. Am I right that it was very dangerous for the relationship between people among the groups and between the groups, between communities?
So it's hard, and it's really hard, particularly for minority groups. You know, when desegregation was happening, for example, in America in the 1950s and 1960s, there were lots of Black thought leaders and Black communities that didn't want their children to be educated with white children. They wanted their children to be with Black teachers, with teachers who cared about them and understood them. They wanted to stay in Black communities where they didn't feel outcast, where they didn't, you know, feel discriminated against. And you know, and that's one way to think about it. And that's one, you know, that's one policy. Well, let's just like keep them separate, give everybody their own territory and you know, and then we'll just kind of like live peacefully side by side, but separate. But the research does not support this at all. And as unfair as it is, it's usually on the burden of the minority groups to, you know, make sure that those friendships and those relationships can happen. So, you know, communities need to be together. There needs to be a way for people to meet and interact. And I think you're right. I think the pandemic made people feel awfully alone, and the vacuum into which social media poured was not helpful, because social media so naturally segregates according to, you know, various algorithms. So there was no chance, or very little chance, to come across or interact with someone who was not part of the group identity that you have.
To cooperate with others, we need a certain ability to understand, or rather imagine, the intentions of others. And we acquire this skill very early. Does language and linguistic communication play an important role in this process?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, language is one of our main tools for cooperation and communication, but it's not the only tool. And I think that, you know, something that really exemplifies that is just the relationship we have with our dogs. We don't speak to each other, but we understand one another. And so I think that, you know, there's this other whole universe of communication that can go on between, you know, two species or two people.
A very important question for me, Vanessa, the one I want to ask you about. From an evolutionary point of view, what is the role of literature in our life? I mean, the fictional stories that we were telling each other around campfires in the past, and today we publish them in books. What did we need stories for?
One of I think the most powerful pieces of research that I came across was in the aftermath of the Rwandan genocide. They were trying to, you know, all sorts of institutions were trying to repair this horrible damage that had occurred by people who were living with each other and among each other, just suddenly, you know, just starting to kill each other in horrible ways. And one of the methods of reparation was the telling of stories. And so, you know, they came together and they would tell stories about a friendship that they had had with the other person. They would you know, they would tell of the story of what happened to their families. They would, you know, they took this into schools and they took it, you know, on radio programs. And so, you know, I think that the stories that we tell are another way of creating these friendships. So, you know, you can go out and you can make a literal friendship, or you can read about someone. I think that, you know, a lot of the great books, what they've done is that they've allowed us to make this connection with someone that we've never met. And, you know, even if that person is a fictional character, I mean, just off the top of my head, books like The Kite Runner just, you know, just created this incredible sympathy in America for people who've been persecuted by the Taliban. I think that, you know, books like The Poison Bible just opened people's eyes to, missionary life in the Congo and the Congolese people. I think that, we're limited just by time and geography and money and everything by the number of people not of our group that we could meet. And so I think books and literature is a way for us to come to know these people, and then also to form these abstract friendships, which is basically what we do. And just hearing about these other groups, imagining the lives they live, the challenges they face. And that's why when people are trying to rally their group around an idea or a cause, it always starts off with one story, like a story of someone who's lost their family, or a story of someone who is sick and trying to get well. I mean, we make these mental connections with other people, whether they're real or not, and whether we know them or not. So I think that is the big benefit of literature, is allowing us to establish these cross-group friendships, even among imaginary lines.
We can only teach others if we remember what it is like not to know. These are words from your book. Could you please elaborate on this thought? I really love this line, but what does it mean that we can teach others when we get back to the point in our education when we didn't know?
And I think it just goes back to the idea of storytelling. If you're a writer, you have to imagine that your reader doesn't know anything, and so you need to give them this idea or this story. You need to fill them on the background information, and for that you have to teleport your mind into another mind that doesn't know anything about what you're talking about, and then imagine their experiences and how much or how little experience they have before you try and paint this picture. And really what it's all about always in teaching or writing or anything is making a connection, and being able to build a connection that will then allow you to cooperate. So whether it's, going out to certain, and solving a problem together, or whether it's, to raise awareness of a problem that exists, I think that's really the purpose of teaching and writing and literature and everything, is just to establish a connection with someone else.
What are your predictions about the future of the human species? Will the friend list actually survive, or will the friend list be exploited? Let me finish the question. Or will the friend list be exploited by those who want to dominate?
I change from day to day. Sometimes I wake up and I'm like, it's all gonna be great. Like we're gonna make it. Like we've made it this far. We're definitely gonna make it in the future. And other days I'm like, oh my God, we're all gonna die. So I think that's one of the reasons why Brian and I wrote this book in the first place, because we really believe that if you understand human nature, then you can overcome human nature. And just because we are this way doesn't mean we have to be this way. So I know that, just personally for me, and knowing the research that exists and the evidence that exists that show that how important friendliness is. I go out of my way to make connections, to withhold judgment, to be patient. And I will just give you an example of what happened an hour beforehand. Is that I was in a car accident about an hour and 20 minutes ago. So I had no idea what happened. Just like a car accident in an intersection, pulled off the road, and and in America, it's such a litigious society. Like everyone tells you, do not say anything, do not admit anything. If you are in an accident, like do not apologize, like you are going to get sued. So basically assume the worst of other people, and don't make any attempt to cooperate or communicate. So we pull off the road and this guy is about to lose it at me. Like he comes out of the car absolutely screaming and, like, how could you take up 2 lanes, all that kind of thing. And I heard all these voices in my head that like, don't like, don't give him anything, like, don't cooperate, don't communicate, like, don't do anything. And instead I'm just like, I am so sorry, are you okay? Like, are you okay? And he was still kind of like, you know, blustering. And but like, I just noticed that, you know, I didn't react. I wasn't angry. I just said, are you okay? Is everything all right? You know, let me see your car. Would you like my information? And it probably took about 15 minutes. And this guy was like telling me about his wife that he had just met, the fact that he had moved there. And by the time the officer left, I mean, we were like best friends. And you know, this is still going to go to the insurance officer and probably, you know, will cost like however many thousands of dollars, but it's like it doesn't matter. And in the end, even in a really intense situation, you know, I don't think any worse of him and he doesn't think any worse of me. And I think all the research shows that that's just a better way to live. So I think with some knowledge, you can go forward and maybe live your life in a slightly different way. I think that voting for people who carry that out, I think upholding democracy is really important. I think that, you know, if we could learn not to put so much faith in technology and know that this is going to be a human-driven cooperative endeavor saving the world and democracy and, you know, the life on Earth as we know it now. So, yeah, it's just a really simple phrase. It's like, don't be a jerk. Don't be a jerk and be nice if you can. And if you can take that on like various different levels, I think that might work for a lot of things. Not everything, but for a lot.
Vanessa, thank you for sharing this story with us. And I'm very sorry that it happened to you. I'm glad that everything is all right. But it was very touching. And thank you for the conversation. It was really a great experience for me. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. It was so wonderful. And just best of luck with everything. And I can't wait to see you in North Carolina.
Let me give one information to the audience. Dear all, next episode of The Nature of the Future will be released on the last Thursday of December. And my interviewee will be Philippe Claudel. So be with us, be with Conrad Festival. Vanessa, once again, thank you so much.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.